Hello and welcome to our BCS futureELITE program of events. Today we welcome Sandra Cockayne and Chris Niger to share their career stories and career advice with us. Sandra is Head of Retail Trading and Delivery at William Hill.
You have entered as an attendee.
And Chris is a Program Manager at the Stars Group. We've made time for Q&A at the end, so please use the questions panel on your GoToWebinar control panel to submit questions as you think of them as we go along, and we'll cover as many as we can before we close at 7 o'clock. So I'll hand over to our first speaker, Sandra Cockayne.
Could you just do that again for me, John, please? Okay, so I think everybody should be able to see my screen now and the presentation. So my name is Sandra Cockayne and I am the Head of Trading and Retail Delivery at William Hill. So this is my story and it's my journey of mentoring, mindfulness and me. Okay, so this is a story of my journey at William Hill. It's what I've learned along the way, and it's how I've changed and adapted and been mindful of the things I've learned and how I've used that really to shape my future experiences and shape the way that I deal with situations now and in the future. So one of the things that I've found is that it's really important to be comfortable with you. Know what matters to you and what your values are, and always stay true to those and stay true to yourself. You need to understand what your brand identity is. That's the way you become a truly authentic and credible leader in my mind. This presentation also covers my journey through management and leadership and some of the differences along the way. And it also shows how I think my journey moves from more of a management into a leadership position. And it demonstrates the powerfulness of mentoring and how that's helped me through my journey. And if this presentation gets you to think about one thing about yourselves that you want to change as a result of this, or how you may approach things differently, then that's a massive achievement to me and has hit the right spot. Okay, so this is really about sound bites and about food for thought, really. And, you know, as I said, this is my journey. Some of it is my learnings along the way, but some of it may resonate with you. So some of it might be good, might be all right, and some of it might not actually sit with you at all. But it's about how I've faced some of the challenges and overcome them throughout my career. So a little bit about me then. So I've worked at William Hill's for 22 years. I know I don't look old enough, but yeah, 22 years. I am married with 2 children who are 9 and 7, who are at present keeping me extremely busy whilst trying to work and homeschool. I'm not a Yorkshire lass, as you probably can tell from my accent, and I hail from a very small village in Cumbria, just close to the town of Appleby. Where I grew up, it was not as big as the big city, and in this tiny village, it was very quiet and people are quite reserved. So I'd say when I was at school, I was quite a shy and timid person. But there's one memory that does stick with me from school that I'm going to share with you now, and that's from when I went from primary to secondary school of which had only 500 pupils, which is small compared to the schools in Leeds. So the head came to visit the 6 pupils who were moving up from the school to the secondary school, just to, you know, gauge how we would fare and see how we would settle in. Feedback was after the session that he could see that I was a future leader and he could see the future leader in me. And it was because he asked one question along the way. He said, "What do you do if you don't know the answer?" And I put my hand up and I was the only one to do so. And I said, "Well, you ask," which seemed a pretty obvious thing for me to say, but he identified that as a trait of being a leader of the future. So I moved to Leeds to complete my degree, and the bright lights enticed me, and I never wanted to go back to living in Cumbria, and more so the opportunities weren't there either. And as the rest of this is history. One thing that I'm not is I am not a techie, I mean I don't profess to be a techie, but I think I've got a pretty good understanding now from my career journey and throughout the experiences that I've had. So my journey then, so let's walk through it. So my whole career journey has been at William Hill, and some people might see this as a bad thing, but I personally don't, but I used to. I was worried about what it would, how it looked, how people would perceive it, and how others would see it if I decided to move on and go elsewhere. This is one of my limiting beliefs, or was one of my limiting beliefs, and was constraining me from progressing. So I've worked on that, and I've worked in many different roles across the organisation, across William Hill, and to be honest, in some it's been like working in a different company. Once I've convinced myself that length of service is not a bad thing, I've been better able to navigate my journey. So my journey started in telephone betting back in 1998, and I swiftly moved on to project manager within that area. I then held 2 project roles within the trading tech area, and finally I've landed as head of trading delivery in retail and the trading sphere. I would say I've probably been a manager since 1998 and a leader since 2001. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to walk you through each stage of my journey. The key areas of the journey are on the left and the key takeaways are on the right. It'll give you a flavour of what my experience is and what I've learned along the way. So way back when, back in 1998, I started out in the call centre as a telephonist. I secured the job just after leaving uni and thought, I'll just do this until I get a proper job, you know, a bit of a stopgap. So whilst I was there, I continued to look for a role in accounts. And one came up at William Hill, and I decided that I'd better try and use my degree, as my mum and dad would kill me if I didn't, and went for a role as an accounts assistant. But what I continued to do was work Saturdays on the phones and also complete overtimes on the phones to pay off my student debts. So in 1999-2000, I got the opportunity to move out to the Southern Island with the company when we offshored due to betting tax, and we offshored the call centre. This was a particularly difficult time in my life. My dad at the time when I moved over to Ireland was pretty ill with cancer, and sadly he died in 2001. I think the big thing here for me is I managed to balance a very difficult time in my life with work and trying to progress my career at William Hill as well as the same time as managing my dad's illness. I pushed myself hard and got my first management role as a team leader by making myself available and showing people what I could do in terms of managing teams and getting the best from them and delivering. So for me, the first key learning is it took a real strength of character, and I had to be really mindful of how I was acting around work. You know, life's knockbacks can make you more determined and more stronger. As a team leader, I was given feedback on numerous occasions that I had a telling style, and it really knocked me at first when I got told this. You know, I had to really work on it and look at ways of being more collaborative and adopting that more coaching style. So I had to change how I acted with people, and I adopted a coaching style, and the results were great. The people were on the journey with me, they were on the same boat, they wanted to achieve the same goals as we as an organisation wanted to achieve, and I wanted to achieve too. This led me on to my next role as an ops manager in Sheffield. Had a couple of knockbacks in Leeds, so bit the bullet and went for the role in the Sheffield call centre and managed to secure it. So whilst I was there, it was great for me because I often got to deputise for the call centre manager. But taking the role in the first instance was quite a difficult decision, as the commute was much longer than I experienced in Leeds, which hopped on a bus and hopped off again. This time it was like at least an hour, if not more, in traffic. And I had to consider work-life balance. But the key point here is I didn't give up despite the fact that I've been knocked back in Leeds. And I also realised that even if I did the role in Sheffield for a short time, it would show my commitment and drive to doing something bigger and better. I think the next stage in my journey for me was I was promoted to, well, I was given a secondment to head of customer services back in 2007. So what was really interesting here was that how the operators in customer services actually saw the customer at this point in time. A lot of their approach, they had apathy about approaching the calls. They saw the customer as the enemy and really didn't want to delight them. And it really surprised me that they didn't want to get it right first time for the customer. So with the management team and with the leaders within that area, I worked together to introduce some KPI targets and give some clear goals and work on the behaviours with the guys in the teams as well. We use data to lead us in key decisions and to help us focus on the key goals and drive us forwards. So the key point here for me was that you know, making that shift from task-based orientation to more of a leadership collaborative approach really helped us drive our vision and mission forwards and helped us, you know, to bring the customer to the heart of what we do. So I then moved into the next phase of my career, which was a project manager in telephone betting. So this meant great news for me, back in Leeds, shorter commute, work-life balance, great. So I really knew as soon as I started this role that this was what I wanted to do and this was the area I really wanted to be in. So I found my niche. It really excited me to work with people and then to look at processes and then to use technology to solve some of the trickier problems that telephone were facing at that point in time. I remember some of these small initiatives that we delivered on time to budget and to plan was things like text betting, which seems way back when now. But I was involved in also the wider telephone betting strategy and leading change within the call centre. One of these projects was Project Hummingbird, which was a big programme of change and it had many moving parts. We had to tightly manage people impact of offshoring the call centre, which was what Project Hummingbird was all about. And we had to manage key suppliers as well as keeping the lights on and keeping the customers happy. So it was very methodical, followed a very waterfall approach and principles. So the big problem for me at this stage was that the programme of work actually made my role redundant. So coupled with this, I had a delivery of my own to contend with. I was pregnant with my first child, Jack, and he was due a couple of months in the May before the programme finished. So it's here I embarked on my first mentoring relationship. And I remember this relationship, it was fabulous. It was the first time I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And my mentor was a senior IT leader within the organisation, so somebody quite different to the role I was currently doing at this time. He was fabulous. His skills, people skills, were second to none. He was a great listener and he gave me some really solid advice around how to handle my situation, being made redundant, and made me think more about me and where I wanted to go. He gave me interview and CV tips because clearly I needed them at that point with being made redundant. And not only did he give me some work-related advice, but he was a father of 3 and his wife was a midwife. So he gave me some really key hints and tips on how to manage the kids and you know, how to take that forwards. So he played a key role in this, and he made me see things differently. And you know, he made me see that there was life beyond the role I was currently in at the time. So pleasingly, Project Hummingbird delivered to time, to budget and plan, despite the deep personal impact that it was going to have on my own life. So, and I helped keep that on track. But I think it's key to try not to be impacted by the personal stuff. So I had to plough on. There was lots of people impacted, not just me, and you haven't to let it get in the way of the job. And I think the key takeaway here for me is about being resilient and you know, continued resilience. So rather than wait for my formal return to work, as soon as I had Jack in the May, as soon as possible, I wanted to crack on and get on with the consultation process and not wait till I had to come back, because I didn't want to deal with the uncertainty. So I was made aware of roles that were available to me through the consultation process, and I applied for 4. One was involving travel to Gibraltar at the time, and I decided that that one wasn't really an option because of the new baby. 2 others were in infrastructure, at which point in time it didn't really suit me to move into somewhere completely new, such as infrastructure. But the 4th role was as a project manager in trading IT, I should say. So I went for my interview. Unfortunately for me, the project that the team that I was moving into was headed up by my former mentor, and one of his direct reports was there interviewing me as well. So whilst I was really apprehensive about going for the interview, because it was the first time I'd left my son on his own, and I was really nervous about it because of the fact it was a completely different area, I got the role there and then, and it really excited me. So, but the role was outside my comfort zone. But going back to what I thought about, thinking about what I was told when I was an 11-year-old girl, when I put my hand up and said, all you need to do is ask for help. I knew that if I struggled, I could always ask for help. Okay, so I moved into the role, and I was really nervous. It was a big unknown, and my first week in the job, my boss was on holiday, so it was really throw me in at the deep end. So when I attended my first meeting, I remember they were talking about a project that they were delivering for the trading team, and it was a tech implementation of something. I can't remember exactly what. But the thing that really took me aback was they hadn't spoken to the traders about what they actually wanted. And I wasn't sure what they intended to build would hit the mark. So I asked them to go and talk to the traders, and lo and behold, it transpired I was correct, and the things that they were going to build weren't actually going to hit the spot. So I think that really demonstrates how the customer should always come first, whether that's internal or external. You should always keep your mind's eye on that. I also had to deal what I thought was at the time newfangled ways of working. So I'd previously been used to waterfall methodologies for delivery, and this term came into light. It was agile, and I didn't have a clue. So I had to develop into this, and I had to learn about agile ways of working. And like I say, I didn't have a clue at the start. I had to Google loads of things. But I think the thing here is that you've constantly got to develop, and you've constantly got to learn. I mean, this year I've passed my disciplined agile exam, which is another thing that, another string to my bow, but it demonstrates how constant learning is key. And then I had another new delivery. My son Sam was born in this time. So when I came back after maternity leave, after taking I think it's 10 months out, I came back on 4 days full time, which was fabulous. And I was given a greenfield project to work on, and it was building out a new platform for our US and international expansion. So it was about, it was not only working with new tech, it was working with a new team, contractors mixed with permy staff, and it was really had to find my feet again. But I soon realised I wanted more, so push myself into other projects within the trading sphere, and soon started to pick up some of the other projects that are on the periphery, and also helping PMs along the way with the projects that they were working on within trading. So this led me to being promoted to senior PM. And I mean, I suppose my biggest achievement here was coming back for a second time round after having another baby and managing 2 small children whilst holding down a full-time job as well. So in the senior PM role, I was back to having a team to manage, which was great. So it was more than just having the team to manage. It was about leading the whole team to success, and it was around, driving towards those common goals that rolled up into that vision that we were trying to achieve. So it wasn't just task and deadline driven approach, but about the leading to success and letting the team deliver and solve the problems for you. It really was a focus more on the softer skills, the vision, the wider strategy. But again, I wanted to push myself further, and I wanted a head of delivery role. So I went for an international head of delivery role, and the next part was really something I've never ever experienced before, and thankfully haven't experienced again. I was put in a combative interview situation, which I didn't know existed until afterwards. So it really was. I went in, I had to do a presentation, and I got bombarded with questions from word go. So there's many ways that I could have approached it. I could have crumbled and walked out. I could have shouted back at them, but I used my skills and experience that I've learned across the way and gained in the past to help me approach it. So I told myself, come on, Sandra, you've got this, you've got it nailed, you've been prepared, just go with the flow and answer the questions. If you can't answer them, tell you you'll come back to them. My response was cool, but it was direct and it really hit the mark. So whilst I didn't actually get the job, the feedback that I had was really good, and they said that I did really well during that stressful situation of the combative interview. So, you know, again, resilience plays through. So I was hungry for the head of delivery role and decided to take matters into my own hands and make it mine by taking on more responsibility from my current line manager and looking after the channel, deputising and pretty much doing the role day to day. And really here, leadership played through. There was a lot of learning, but I had to learn how to bring the team with me. But I did this purposefully and mindfully, setting vision and looking at softer skills and bringing the team on to meet a common goal. Okay, so that leads me on to my current role, which is the head of delivery for trading and retail. So this role is about leading change, and there's been many changes that I've had to deliver. So I had to take down operations within our Sophia office and close them down, which was quite emotional. And then we're spinning up new offices within our Krakow office and spinning up new teams there. And, you know, it's led to different working practices, working with different people across different countries and obviously different cultures as well. And I think as a leader, I've had to show adaptability and flexibility and had to change my approach. I've also had to adapt work-home life as well by leaving the kids when I fly out to Krakow and changing things around there as well. I'm really privileged to have been on some great leadership development courses during my time at William Hill. One of such quite recently was a course run by Blue Sky Thinking, and it really has challenged me to think about things differently. I've also been part of the 30% mentoring scheme, which is aimed at getting 30% of female leaders into senior positions, and that was really, really powerful for me. So it pushed me again to examine me and how I operate, not just about the what, but about the how. So I had 3 objectives when I set out for this endeavour. One was around my length of service because it was troubling me. Second was around influencing skills. And the third was around speaking at events as such as this. And, you know, because I believed this was a limiting belief and you know, and I had to face into it. And then I've been lucky enough to be part of a William Hill internal programme, which is Rising Stars, which is identifying leaders of the future. Again, this really has made me think about things differently. More recently, I've been involved in the Dell mentoring scheme, whereby I'm now mentoring a junior member of a squad, and she's, you know, taking my learnings on board, and, you know, I'm sharing what I've learned to hopefully help her on her journey. So, and then that takes you to today. So what are the key snippets or food for thought that I would like you to draw out of from my journey? So I think the key things are is being mindful of how you approach things. Take the learnings, experiences from the past, not only your own learnings, but others' learnings too, and apply them to new situations. I think the key thing for me is if you get knocked back up, get knocked back, don't give up. Get back up and show resilience. Resilience is key for me. Stay true to your core values. That's what shapes you. If you think about what these are and you know and about what might be one of your core values, one of mine's loyalty, for example, and the thing is, don't try and be somebody that you're not. It won't come through. It won't be authentic. Think about how this links to your personal brand and how remaining true to yourself is key. Think about how you'd like to be perceived by others outside of your normal sphere of influence, and the work required to you to strengthen those skills that you already have. And I think this all leads and builds up to being a credible leader. And personal credibility is key for me. And you know, what you know about yourself, it's about knowing you. And this leads me on to really a great quote. So on the Rising Stars Club, we did 4 modules, and one of them was around personal credibility. And this is a great quote from Jim Rohn. It's learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So investing in yourself for me is a primary goal. This is what I've come to realise will help drive real growth and push me forwards. If you work on the rest, if you work on that and if you work on you, the rest will actually come naturally and fall into place. Might not be quick and easy, and it might not be as fast as you would like, and you probably will have many knockbacks and setbacks on the way. But if you don't challenge and push yourself, then you won't get there, and you need to do that. So in terms of challenging and pushing myself, one of the times for me was when I pushed myself moving into IT. It was completely alien and a new area. So, you know, it was a new thing and I knew I had to go and do it. And again, today, I'm out of my comfort zone. Speaking out and speaking in public is not one of my big things that I like to do, because I've told myself for so long, I can't, I won't, I'm not, because I'm not as good as that other person. But if you face into it, then, you know, you will get better. So I went to a session the other day and it was about brand and confidence. It's about turning the negatives into positives, and then it forms a habit. So it will no longer become that limiting belief. And as I mentioned, limiting belief is a term that I used earlier, and it's what my dislike of speaking out probably is. Well, it is. Okay. So, and finally, the power of mentoring. This has been amazing for me. I have had some incredible mentors and have been incredibly lucky along the way to have had them. So mentoring is a fantastic way to get a different perspective on things. It makes you challenge yourself. It's both rewarding for you as a mentor or mentee. This is a quote from my current mentee on the Dell mentoring program. And Grace has really given me food for thought, and it's really rewarding to hear the positive impact that our sessions are having on her approach to her career. So the one piece of advice I would give you is, if you can find a mentor, go out and seek one. And if you get the right one, it's a great experience. Thank you for listening.
Sandra, that was wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. We've got a good number of questions through. We'll save them up until the end. And for the time being, I'll hand over to Chris. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. I'm doing this off my iPad, so you'll be able to see sort of more than one slide at a time. So you've got a bit of a sneak preview going on there. So just to explain that. And I'm going to talk today a bit about the importance of people in technology change and why I think that's a really important factor in delivering sustainable change. So first, a little bit about me. So people quite often panic when they get introduced to me and they see my name and they've no idea how to pronounce it. And I've had lots of weird and wonderful attempts over the years, but the easy way to think about it is it's like the Swiss mountain, the Eiger, but with an N at the start. I won't go into some of the interesting variations on that I've had. I'm a program manager working in sort of IT and change for about 25 years now. Done quite a lot of interim work over the last sort of 8 or 9 years. So I've been around quite a lot of different places. Some of the most recent on the right there, but mainly within financial services, a lot of the sort of retail banks, etc. A bit of consultancy, bit of industry. One of the things I would say is the similarities and challenges in different organisations tend to be more similar than you might think. I've also, for the last 5 years, been a listening volunteer for my local branch of York Samaritans, and I'm currently spending lockdown sharing the house with 2 teenagers, 1 midwife, who I'm married to, by the way, and 4 cats. And over the next 20 minutes, you will come to realise I tend to speak fluently in quotes, mostly movie quotes, but some other ones as well. But I'll start off with a bit of a story that I think tends to illustrate my point quite nicely. So, as well as film, I've also been a bit of a aviation geek throughout my life. Chuck Yeager, some of you may have heard of, test pilot, first man to break the sound barrier. And during the Korean War, the US Air Force was able to obtain a Russian fighter jet from a defector. And so Yeager was asked to come and test fly that so they could establish all the various technical parameters of performance, how high it could fly, how fast it could fly, what its fuel economy was, etc. And towards the end of that process, one of his fellow pilots said to him, well, why haven't we sort of done a dogfight between the Russian plane and the American plane so we can see which one is better? And Yeager said to him, well, because it's not the plane that matters, it's the pilot. And he was laughed at. So he said, okay, I will fly the Russian plane and you fly the American plane, and then we'll swap.
Chris, before we get the denouement, we can't see your slides. I don't know if there's something
that
you can press. Thanks, Chris.
Sorry about that. Let's see why. Oh, hang on. Can you see them now?
Perfect.
Sorry about that, everyone. So yes, Yeager took off in the Russian plane and his colleague took off in the American plane, and Yeager won. And they landed, swapped aircrafts, took off again, and Yeager won again. And upon landing, his colleague said to him, wow, I really didn't think the human factor made that much difference. I always thought it was all in the airplane. And for me, the lesson I've always taken from that is that technology, and to a certain extent being technocratic in your sort of delivery and your sort of project management approach, will only get you so far. I remember early in my career in the 90s, CRM was the big silver bullet that everyone thought was going to help them get customer centric. And really, sort of whilst that took organizations so far, if the people who worked in the call centers or within the organization as a whole didn't have a customer centric mindset, then the technology really didn't make that big a difference, despite the many millions that might have been invested in software. So work somewhere that promotes people like you. Hess van Geur, not anyone on this call would know, I'm sure, but one of the smartest people I've met, someone I met when I was doing my master's degree about 8 years ago. And this came up in a conversation we had when I was considering whether or not to take a new role. And the message he was trying to give me is really that we all do our best work where we're working somewhere that feels right for us. Because if you're spending all your time trying to be someone who you're not, then that's not sustainable. It's going to be exhausting. You're really not going to get out of that role what you hope for, and sort of after a while it's going to become frustrating for the organization and for you. But you also need to understand that from the team who's working sort of with you and for you as well. What's their goals? What's their motivation? How do you get the best out of them? And for me, that's always been a point whenever I've started somewhere new, to sort of sit down with people and understand what they want to get out of the next 12 to 18 months. And in some cases, it might just be, I want to do my job, as well as I can, but I'm not interested in promotion, etc. And that's fine, but understanding that helps. The other side of that is that organizations, people, departments change. So that great boss you've got along with has really helped your career. They may leave, they may, sort of move to a different area, move to a different organization. So be aware of when those changes are happening around you and act accordingly in line with how you want to progress your career. What do I need to do today to be successful? So I heard this going into work one day on a radio program. I think it was Lloyd Blankfein, who was one of the bigwigs in Goldman Sachs. I can't swear to that. But I think this is all really about ruthlessly prioritizing in your sort of day-to-day work in terms of what are the things that are the most important on that ever sort of everlasting to-do list. And that's not necessarily about firefighting day to day. In fact, if it is, there's probably something wrong that needs to be addressed. It's not even specifically about delivery of a given project. It could be about sort of setting up some of the long-term sort of processes, people factors, success factors for your team or for your organization. But for me, it's about getting those things over the line, getting things completed out the door, rather than getting sort of lots of stuff half done or focusing on things that might be easier but aren't necessarily the most important things. The key to this business is personal relationships. Again, building trust quickly for me is really important. Understanding what are your stakeholders, what are the people you work with and for worried about. Even if you think they're worried about the wrong things, it's important to understand that. Where are the early opportunities to build credibility and reputation? I like to think of this as being agile in mindset, not so much in process. So if you want to, gain trust from people, you can't afford to wait 6 months, a year for the project you're working on to deliver. So what can you do early on? Can you improve the quality of reporting? Can you improve relationships? Can you improve sort of early examples of quality? Challenge and take some risks, but don't necessarily be critical of people for the sake of it. One organization I worked in, I could see that one of my peers sort of had some issues in his area of the team, and we sat down, we talked about it, and we were able to sort of work things through to the extent that he was happy for his team to take instructions from me as though they were coming from him. So although I had been in some ways critical and I'd sort of challenged that person, the relationship was, if anything, strengthened by it, and again, sort of made him more successful. One of my personal bugbears, show me numbers. If you want to convince me of something, show me data. I will often see that, especially when it comes to things like status reporting, sort of risk and issue management or mitigation or articulation, it can be very subjective, which is a very human thing to do. We sort of tend to sort of write about, articulate what we are, sort of potentially worried about at any given point in time, or what's immediately sort of blocking us. But it doesn't necessarily give you the big picture. It doesn't necessarily tell you whether things are overall going to plan, going well, or not, if it doesn't have that context. So, if you don't have a burn down chart, you don't have information on how far you're away from your key milestones are, etc. It doesn't mean you ignore instinct, experience, value judgments, all those human factors that are still incredibly valuable, but it needs to be set in the context of what's the data telling us about how well we're doing, how big a threat something is, and how long we've got to mitigate it. State what you expect, then expect it. I think that what this is trying to say is, when you're trying to communicate to either stakeholders or team members or suppliers, anyone involved in your delivery, being honest with yourself, how clear and how decisive, if you like, how accountable are you being to make sure that everyone sort of gets what they want? throughout my career, one of the things I've tended to notice is that where I've not had things go the way I wanted them to, it's often because I haven't communicated early enough or clearly enough or sort of often enough. That's not necessarily about sort of setting hairs running and sort of worrying people unnecessarily. You need to be providing answers as well as problems. But I think it's also important when you're working with a team that you set that big picture as well. So they don't just understand what the particular problem is; they understand why it's important. I also think there's a big difference between being assertive and being aggressive, which again is something I struggled with earlier in my career. And the way that's been articulated to me sometimes is that being assertive is being demanding, but being reasonable at the same time. And being aggressive, hostile is where the actual demand, couldn't objectively be viewed as reasonable. And that's a negotiation. You have to listen as well and think that, okay, maybe I'm wrong about something. Maybe I need to take on board different points of view. But going back to then expected, once you've agreed what's expected, you need to hold people accountable. And, to that last point, you need to keep, sort of problems or poor quality in the kitchen, as it were. Don't just ship something because, we've come up on a milestone, we've come up on the deadline, we know it's not good quality, but we're going to send it out into the world anyway. Any of us, we can't do it all. I don't claim to be the best, but one of the things I do spend a lot of time and effort focusing on is forming or trying to form teams around me that complement my skill sets. So don't be afraid to work with people who are different than you, have different opinions, different views, different ways of working. And I think most importantly, don't be afraid to work for people who are better than you. I've worked with a number of people in my career who at the time I recognized as being more talented than I was, and have probably since gone on to bigger and better things. And that's been very rewarding to help them develop their careers, but also helped make me more successful by bringing those people into my teams and bringing them along. You will always have within any team, within any environment, problem areas, sort of problem projects, problem people, and what you need is a bandwidth to be able to sort of dive down and resolve those issues whilst being able to rely on, sort of most of the team to sort of get on and deliver successfully. Another point, having great leaders really does matter. It sounds obvious, but again, on one of the big programs I worked on, I worked for a really tough exec sponsor. But he was tough on us as a delivery team. He was also tough on his own people to make sure that the change landed and to work with us to make sure the change landed and not blame any issues there might be with the technology. Now, I was very lucky in that instance to have that. But in other instances, I've had to coach some of my sponsors and stakeholders on what I've needed from them to make the change successful. And I think being willing to do that and being able to do that is a really important factor in success. Work the problem. I think that the most important thing I've learned here is essentially face up to problems early. You might have to accept that you don't have perfect knowledge, you don't have perfect outcomes, and you might need to, on some occasions, own the decisions when things go badly. I've always found when I've made bad judgment calls, I've got more respect when I've owned up to them and taken responsibility for ultimately resolving those issues than when I've tried to bat them away. But going back to the first point, the most important thing for me is, you know, when you know you've got a problem, deal with it early, because it's better to have more time to deal with something than less. And learn, but don't obsess. So figure out what went wrong, learn from it, but don't spend the next 6 months beating yourself up. Sometimes a number of small decisions I find on projects can have an outsized impact, and that's why it's important. So even though it can seem, when you're in some of these meetings, steering groups, key decision meetings, it can seem a bit staged, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think for those key decisions, the more time you spend in rehearsal, preparation, getting early buy-in, that will bring great benefits. But don't hog the limelight. I think getting other people to be part of that process is important, both in building buy-in, but also building the team. Also, don't let stakeholders be passive. We've probably all sat in sort of steering groups or program boards where it feels like you're just reporting information rather than actually getting steer or key decisions, and that can be frustrating. But it's up to all of us as delivery professionals to not let that happen, to set those things up in the right way so that they do the job they're meant to. Don't get obsessed about your title. You know, sort of below the most senior levels, does it really matter? And we shouldn't let specific, whilst it's important to have roles and responsibilities so that you don't get overlap, that also shouldn't restrict innovation, ownership, servant leadership. People should be willing to do what's needed to make the project or program successful, without that leading to them sort of neglecting their core tasks and maybe leaving your flank exposed. And as ever in this world, you are only as ever as good as your last movie. So thank you for listening. Hope that was useful, and that endeth the lesson, as Jim Malone would say.
Thank you very much, Chris. That's fantastic. And we've had questions pouring in. So if we can welcome Sandra back to the panel. Yes, there we are. Then we can take one or two of the questions. There are quite a number of people, Sandra, who would who love the idea and have perhaps some experience secondhand of mentoring, and they are asking, in a nutshell, how do I find a mentor? And one person asks, do I have to pay? Oh, Sandra, you're muted. Well, I'll just unmute you.
I'm here. I'm back.
Yes.
So I'm fortunate enough that within William Hill that we run an internal mentoring scheme. So some of the larger organisations that some of the people watching may be part of potentially could have a mentoring scheme running in the background that they're maybe not aware of. So first of all, I'd go there and ask. But then I'd ask colleagues and I'd ask around for suitable candidates to be a mentor for themselves. It depends what their goals and aspirations are and where they want to go and what they want to do. I've been part of very structured schemes such as the 30% Club and the Dell mentoring scheme, and they're things that my organisation has entered into. But there's no harm in actually going out and, you know, asking people that you've worked with in the past. You might have had a particularly good leader that you've worked with, that you've aspired to be, take some of their learnings from, and you may think that they may make a good mentor. And there's nothing wrong with going and approaching people to become a mentor, but it's really key to understand what you're wanting to get from that relationship, is what I would say. And what are your goals, and why do you feel that mentoring would be right for you, as opposed to like your normal management one-to-ones or your performance management one-to-ones? And what would be the difference for you as a result of that?
Thank you for that. A subsidiary question.
You don't have to pay.
A subsidiary question to that. Somebody's asked, do you have any advice to manage continuous learning and development when the company doesn't facilitate that easily?
Well, I'd say the learning's down to the individual themselves as well. So if you've got a thirst for knowledge and a thirst for learning new things, you don't have to rely just on the company to go away and do that. Yes, sometimes it helps in terms of funding if it's particularly expensive, the thing that you're wanting to do. And in that instance, I would say that if it's relevant to your job role and applies to you and you feel it's necessary, then there's no reason why you shouldn't approach the individuals within the company to ask for them to assist and help you with that learning. But I think learning is down to the individual themselves, and how much they want to drive themselves forward and how much they want to push themselves forward. I don't know what you think about that, Chris.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think also, there's obviously different sorts of learning. There's learning that leads to an accreditation at the end, but there's also learning that is just the accumulation of knowledge that can be through sort of books, attending events like this, sort of subscribing to sort of news articles, etc. So, to your point, I think understanding what you want to get out of that and what that process of learning looks like is important.
Thank you for that. Here's an interesting one. We've heard a lot about authenticity, working somewhere where they promote people like you. Nature or nurture? Do you think that project management and leadership is something that comes naturally, or is it a taught skill?
I think it's an accumulation of all our experiences, and that's kind of what I was trying to do on my first slide when I said this is a little bit about me, because I think try as we might, I think it's very difficult to take all the different influences and experiences we have and not have them influence our working style, our leadership style in some way. If you forced me, I'd probably say more nurture than nature as being probably more important. But equally, we can't deny our genetics. One of the things I would say is I am a natural introvert, but that doesn't stop me doing things like this. It doesn't stop me being a leader. It just means I've probably got a different style from someone who's a natural extrovert.
And I think I'd echo that. There's lots and lots of different styles, and I do think experience does shape the way that you lead in the future. And I think you can learn some skills, and you can fine-tune skills as you go through life. And I think that the more experiences you have, the better you become at certain things. So when I started out, as I said in my presentation, I had very much a telling style, and I had to learn how to temper that down and be able to sort of like learn a more coaching style to bring people to bring the best out of people. And I think as you go through your career, you do learn these things.
There's an interesting follow-up to that very point. Have you ever worked for a poor leader, and how did you address it? Did you use those skills to try to develop them?
Do you want me to go first on that, Sandra?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, you don't have to name names.
No,
Exactly.
I think the person who's gone through a career and not worked for a poor leader is very lucky indeed. I think that there's multiple ways of dealing with that. I think one is, if you're leading people yourself, I think one of the questions you have to ask is, how can I shield my team as much as possible from that? I think there's questions around, can I adapt anything about my style to sort of mitigate the impact of that poor leadership on myself. I think going to my point about think that you might be wrong, is it are they really a poor leader, or actually is there something I could learn from this? And finally, one of the things I said in that slide about sort of work somewhere that promotes people like you, that won't necessarily always stay the same. So you might need to make some big decisions and say, actually, this is no longer the place for me, and I need to get what I want from my career. Maybe I need to go, sort of find the next place that promotes people like me.
Sandra?
I think yes is the answer. I think we all have, as Chris said, worked for a poor leader in the past, and I think, I mean, through coaching and indirect coaching, with them not realizing you're doing it, you can make an impact on their leadership style as well. But some people won't change, and and ultimately they might move on, or you might move on, as Chris has said. And I suppose it depends if you want to be in that environment and work with them, and you think there's still a gain for you to be made as a result of that. And I do think that protecting your team is key as well. But to the degree that they've got to experience these things as well, to live and grow, learn and grow from them too. So you don't want to protect them to the point where they're not experiencing some of the things that the leader's doing, because you want them to grow and come out the other side a better person, just as you probably will do from learning from that, because you can learn that you don't want to be like that as well, and you don't want to pick up those traits, and you want to adopt a different style to that individual. And sometimes that can be powerful enough, if you have a team of people behind you, to make the person decide that they don't want to be there either.
I think what just a final thought on that, one of the things to try and understand is, why are they exhibiting those behaviors? So one of the things I've experienced in the past is a leader, so an exec, stakeholder or sponsor might behave in a certain way because they've had bad experiences with the IT or change function within the organization in the past. If you can demonstrate that you're able to sort of turn that around for them on this specific project or program, that can be very powerful and then change their style. I remember very clearly an organization I worked with a few years ago where that was the situation. And one of my sort of stakeholders, just before going into a steering group, said to me, "Don't underestimate how powerful your voice is in there now," because I'd established credibility. I'd established that actually I was going to deliver for them.
It's interesting that somebody's in a way predicted that point by asking, what is your view when building a team? Would you always look for specific experience of the project type or the industry, or would you focus more on project delivery experience as perhaps a transferable skill set? Chris?
Depends what you wanted the project team for as well, I suppose. It depends what you were building. I think that diverse teams across the board are the way forward, and I think that a mixture of skill sets, some stronger people, some maybe not as strong as others, are key. And diverse teams for me are always the ones that have performed better in the past.
Chris, do you have
I'd agree with that. I think in one of the comments I make as well is sort of, in the real world, you very rarely have the perfect choice. So, sort of ideally, you want the person with all those people and delivery skills and all the rest of it, who's worked in the industry, who's delivered that software package, etc. But you don't often get that choice. And I think in general, I would probably go for someone with the people skills and the stakeholder skills and the core delivery skills over specific software package and specific industry. I've never been one of those people who've done SAP or Salesforce or whatever from project to project. I've tended to do lots of things differently, and I think there's a lot of value in that broad experience.
And finally, a one-word answer. It's possibly a contradiction in terms, but is there ever a place for command and control leadership? Chris?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
You've got half a minute to expand on those answers. Why did you say that, Sandra?
So I think in certain circumstances it warrants it. In most circumstances I'd actually say no, but I think in certain situations whereby that you've just got to get the job done, then yes. And it depends on the people within the team as well. So you could have very much a fledgling team who have never worked on something before but have a really tight deadline and need to get things done. I would prefer never to use that style, the command and control style. And I prefer to let the team solve the problem themselves rather than go and tell them what the solution is. But sometimes you've just got to get shit done.
Nicely put. Chris, do you concur?
Yeah, I think I
10
would have
seconds.
said pretty much exactly what Sandra just said in that scenario. Sometimes you've just got to get stuff done. You don't have time for the debate.
Yes, and we've run out of time for the webinar. But thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you very much, Chris. These have been fascinating presentations. I'm sorry we haven't reached all the questions that were submitted, but the slides are available on the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel, and we can mail them out to anybody who would like them, and we'll make the recording of this webinar available in a day or two after the event. So thank you very much both, and thank you everybody who's been listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, goodbye.